Ethan Cole dropped his suitcase on the porch, heart hammering, and rang the doorbell he hadn't touched in 8 months. He had a whole speech ready, a joke, a grin, maybe flowers. What he got instead was Lydia Harper opening the door, freezing for exactly 1 second, and then kissing him like the world was ending. And he was the only solid thing left in it. No scream, no laugh, no "oh my God, you're back." Just her hands on his face, her lips on his. 12 years collapsing into 10 seconds. And Ethan, a man who had photographed war zones, monsoons, and mountain glaciers, had absolutely no idea what to do next. If you're watching from Chicago, Dallas, Phoenix, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this is your kind of storytelling, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. The cab smelled like pine air freshener and old leather, and Ethan Cole sat in the back seat with his camera bag between his knees and 3 weeks' worth of decisions, sitting on his chest like a stone. Outside the window, Chicago looked exactly the way he remembered it: wide, gray, unapologetic. November had already stripped the trees bare, and the wind off the lake was the kind that didn't ask permission before it got inside your coat. He hadn't told anyone he was coming back. Not his neighbor, who was watering his plants. Not his sister in Cincinnati, who would have made it into a whole thing. Not even Marcus, his oldest friend from the army, who always seemed to know when something was off before Ethan did. And definitely not Lydia. Especially not Lydia. He'd been in Barcelona for 8 months. 8 months of golden light and narrow streets and cathedrals that made you feel small in a way that was almost comfortable. 8 months of photographing other people's lives, weddings, street festivals, a documentary project on refugee resettlement that had taken him to 3 countries and used up more film than he'd budgeted for. The contract was supposed to run through December. 14 more weeks. He'd ended it 3 weeks early. His agency director, a no-nonsense woman named Claudette, had looked at him across a cafe table in the Gothic Quarter and said, "Ethan, you've turned in 20% less work in the last 6 weeks. That doesn't happen with you. What's going on?" He hadn't had an answer for her. Not a real one. He'd said something about burnout, creative fatigue, needing to reset, all of which was partially true. Claudette had accepted it with the grace of a woman who'd been managing creative professionals for 30 years and knew when someone was lying to themselves more than they were lying to her. She'd let him go. Said the project was in good shape, that she'd use a local photographer to finish the final series, and that she'd be in touch about the next contract in the spring. He'd booked his flight that same afternoon, and now, sitting in the back of a Chicago cab, watching the skyline rise up through the smudged window, Ethan finally admitted to himself quietly, the way men his age admitted things they'd been running from, that burnout had nothing to do with it. It was the phone call. 6 weeks ago. He'd been developing film in the small darkroom he'd set up in his Barcelona apartment, a borrowed space in a borrowed city, when his phone buzzed on the counter. Lydia. "Hey." Her voice had been careful, controlled in the way it only got when she was working hard not to sound like something was wrong. "Hey yourself," he'd said. "It's almost midnight here. I know. I'm sorry. I needed to hear your voice. Is that weird?" It's not weird. He had said that automatically, because that was what they did. 12 years of calling each other at odd hours. 12 years of "I just needed to hear your voice, and I know it's late, but..." And you're the only person I can say this to. It wasn't weird, it was just them. But something in her tone that night had been different. She'd told him about a difficult week at the agency, a client who'd pulled a 6-figure contract, a junior designer who'd quit without notice, a board meeting that had gone sideways in a way she hadn't seen coming. He'd listened. He'd said the right things. He'd made her laugh twice, which was always the goal, because Lydia's laugh this low, reluctant sound that always seemed to surprise even her was the best sound he knew. And then, near the end of the call, she'd gone quiet for a moment. "Ethan." "Yeah." Do you ever think about? She stopped. Think about what? Another pause. Long enough to make him straighten up from where he'd been leaning against the counter. Nothing, she said. Never mind. I'm tired. I'm saying things I don't mean. Lydia. Go finish your film. I'm fine. Good night, Ethan. She'd hung up before he could push it. And he'd stood there in his dark room, in the amber safe light glow, with the phone in his hand, thinking about that pause. That do you ever think about? Turning it over, like a photograph that hadn't fully developed yet. He hadn't slept well after that. He hadn't slept well for the 6 weeks after that, either. The cab stopped in front of Lydia's building, on Wrightwood Avenue at 4:47 in the afternoon. Ethan paid the driver, pulled his bag from the trunk, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than was probably reasonable. He had a plan, a simple, safe, completely manageable plan. He would ring the bell. She would open the door. She would scream, because Lydia Harper was not a screamer. But she made an exception for genuine surprises. And because it had happened exactly twice in 12 years, and both times had been the best moments of those respective years. She would scream, he would grin. She would probably hit his arm and say something like, "You absolute idiot, you didn't tell me you were coming back." And then they'd hug, the good kind of hug. The kind that lasted longer than it probably should between two people who were just best friends, and then they'd order Thai food and sit on her couch, and he'd tell her Thai food, and he'd tell her about Barcelona, and she'd tell him about the agency, and everything would go back to being exactly what it had always been. Safe, known, comfortable. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 4C. Yeah. Her voice through the intercom, distracted. Like she was in the middle of something. He almost said something, almost let the surprise go early. Package delivery, he said instead. A pause. I didn't order anything. I just need a signature. Another pause. Then the door buzzed open. He took the elevator up to the 4th floor, stood in front of her door, adjusted his jacket like that was going to help anything. Knocked. He heard her footsteps, the small sound of the deadbolt turning. The handle. The door opened. Lydia Harper stood there in a gray sweater, jeans, bare feet, holding a mug of coffee in her right hand. Her hair was up in the particular messy way it got when she'd been working at home all day. Pencil, probably still in it somewhere. She had a small smudge of something blue near her left wrist, which meant she'd been sketching. She was in the objective, clinical, completely manageable way that Ethan had been acknowledging to himself for approximately 6 years. Beautiful. She looked at him. The mug dropped. Not because she was startled, not because her grip slipped. He could see it in her face, the decision. Instantaneous and total before it happened. Her fingers released the handle deliberately, like her hands had made a choice her brain was still catching up to. The mug hit the hardwood floor of her entryway. Coffee spread in a slow, dark arc. And then Lydia Harper stepped forward, took his face in both hands, and kissed him. Not a greeting, not a joke, not a "oh my God, you're here" moment of celebratory contact that he could pretend was something friends did. This was a woman who had been waiting to do this for a very long time, and had finally decided in the space between the mug, leaving her hand and Ethan's stunned eyes, that she was done waiting. It lasted maybe 8 seconds. 8 seconds that were, without question, the most significant 8 seconds of Ethan Cole's 57 years on Earth. When she pulled back, she didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look apologetic. She looked terrified, but not of what she'd done, of what he was going to say next. He said, "I broke my contract early." She blinked. What? In Barcelona. I ended it 3 weeks early. He was aware that he was talking, and that the words were technically coherent. But he was operating at about 30% capacity. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. I didn't tell you. Ethan. I took the red eye from Madrid. I had a layover in Newark, which was Newark is Newark. And then I got a cab from O'Hare, and I've been sitting in traffic for 40 minutes, and I keep trying to figure out how to say something. I've been not saying for about 6 years. And Ethan. Her voice was quiet. Her hands were still on the sides of his face. Yeah. Come inside. The coffee mug was ceramic. It hadn't broken, just rolled under the entryway table. Lydia picked it up while Ethan stepped inside and set his bag against the wall. She went to the kitchen without saying anything. He heard the sound of paper towels being pulled. Water running. He stood in her living room and tried to remember how to be a person. The apartment was the same way it always was: organized chaos. The particular kind that only creative people achieved. Sketches on the drafting table by the window. Books stacked by subject rather than size on the shelves. A corkboard above her desk covered in reference images and sticky notes in 3 different colors. 2 half-empty mugs on the coffee table, which meant she'd had a long day before he'd arrived. She came back from the kitchen, crossed the living room, and sat on the couch. Not across from him, next to him, close, the way they'd sat 10,000 times. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. The heating system knocked once in the walls. "I have a question," Ethan said finally. "Okay." Was that he stopped, tried again. "In 12 years, we've never." "I know." "So that just now. Was that a thing that was," he exhaled. "I'm going to ask this like an adult and not like a man who just got off a transatlantic flight and had approximately 8 seconds to process something that's completely rearranged my understanding of the last decade of my life." The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. "Go ahead," she said. "Was that planned? Like, specifically, did you make a decision before you opened the door? Or was it?" "Yes," she said. "It was planned." "How long?" She looked at the window for a moment. "How long was it planned? Or how long have I wanted to?" "Either. Both." She turned to look at him directly. And Lydia Harper had always been a woman who could hold a person's gaze without flinching. It was one of the things that made her a great creative director. But right now there was something unguarded in her face that he'd never quite seen before. "I had a therapist," she said, "a few years ago, Dr. Weintraub. She kept pushing me on us. And I kept telling her it was complicated. And she kept telling me that complicated was usually the word people used when they'd already made a decision but weren't ready to act on it." "What decision?" "That I was in love with my best friend." She said it without drama, factually, almost, and that I had been for a very long time. And that I was using the friendship, the safety of it, the "we can't risk this" of it, as a way to avoid doing something terrifying. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "When did you stop seeing Dr. Weintraub?" he asked. "About 2 years ago." "So for 2 years you've been trying to figure out what to do." "Yes." She tucked her feet underneath her on the couch, the way she always did. "I almost told you 4 times. I can tell you exactly when. The night we stayed up until 3 in the morning on your roof after your dad died. The morning you left for your first overseas contract. Last Christmas. When you called me from Lisbon, and we talked for 2.5 hours, and I fell asleep on the phone. And the 4th time." She hesitated. 6 weeks ago." He went still. "The phone call," he said. "The phone call. Do you ever think about?" "Yeah." Her voice was smaller now. "I got scared. I hung up." Ethan stood up. Not out of agitation, just because he was the kind of man who needed to move when he was processing something at this scale. He walked to the window, looked down at Wrightwood, watched a couple walk by below with a dog pulling at its leash. "I booked my flight the next morning," he said, after that call. She didn't answer. He turned around. "Lydia, I booked my flight the next morning. I told Claudette it was creative burnout. I finished out 3 more weeks of work I could have done in 1. Because I was trying to convince myself I was making a reasonable decision and not a. Ethan, I'm 57 years old," he said. "I have a daughter in college. I have a bad knee, and a mortgage, and a camera collection that my sister thinks is a psychological problem. I spent 8 months in Barcelona telling myself that what I was feeling was just." He stopped. "I missed you. Every single day. Not the way you miss a friend, the way you miss A. He stopped again. Lydia stood up. Say it, she said. I was coming back to tell you the truth. Whatever happened after, whether you felt the same way, or whether it made everything weird and ruined us. I was done pretending the truth wasn't true. She crossed the room, stopped in front of him. And what's the truth? She said. He looked at her for a long moment. This woman he had known for 12 years, who had talked him through his divorce, who had hired him before anyone else believed in what he was doing, who had called him on his lowest nights and made him laugh when he was sure he'd forgotten how to, who had always been, in every way that mattered, the most important person in his life, while he'd spent 12 years insisting that didn't mean what it meant. The truth, he said, is that I think I have been in love with you for a very long time, and I left for Barcelona partly because I was a coward. She let out a breath. Then she said, join the club. They stayed up until almost midnight. Not kissing, not again, not yet. As if, by mutual wordless agreement, they'd decided that the conversation needed space before anything else happened. They ordered Thai food. They sat on opposite ends of the couch with the containers between them and talked the way they always talked, freely, tangentially, circling back to the hard things and then sliding sideways into something easier and then circling back again. He told her about the phone call, the way he'd stood in the dark room afterward with the image of those 4 words, do you ever think, developing and never quite coming clear. She told him about the letter. What letter? He said. She was quiet for a moment. When you called from Newark, she said. During your layover, you texted me. Said you were heading to your gate. I didn't answer because I was. She looked at her hands. I was sitting at my desk writing a letter. To who? She looked up. To you. The Thai food containers sat untouched between them. I had decided, she said carefully, that I was going to do one of 2 things. Either I was going to mail it, or I was going to burn it. And whichever I decided before midnight, that was going to be my answer to whether I was going to tell you, or whether I was going to stop. Stop hoping. Stop waiting. Stop, her voice caught slightly. Stop building something in my head that might not exist. Ethan's voice was careful. Did you mail it? She shook her head. Did you burn it? Another shake. Where is it? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she got up, walked to her drafting table, opened the second drawer, and came back with an envelope. She held it in both hands, not offering it, not pulling it away, just holding it. It has 7 words in it, she said. That's all I could get to before I decided I had to stop and decide first. 7 words, he repeated. I need you to know, she said, that no matter what's in it, I don't regret what happened at the door tonight. Whatever comes next, whatever we figure out, whatever gets complicated. She took a breath. I don't regret it. He reached out slowly and took the envelope from her hands. She let him. He turned it over, his name on the front, in her handwriting. He recognized it. She had a particular way of writing his name, slightly faster than her other letters, like it came out before she could overthink it. He opened it. 1 piece of paper, folded once. 7 words. He read them. He read them again. He folded the paper back along its crease, carefully, and placed it on the cushion between them. Then Ethan Cole, 57 years old, single father, war photographer, man who had stood on the rooftops of 3 continents and taken pictures of the whole brutal, beautiful world, put his face in his hands. Not because he was sad, because he had spent 6 years being afraid of something that had been waiting for him all along, and the relief of it, the sheer, staggering, almost unbearable relief, had nowhere else to go. Lydia didn't say anything. She just moved the food containers to the coffee table, closed the space between them, and put her hand on his back the way she had 1,000 times before. Only this time, neither of them was pretending it was just that. The 7 words were, I can't keep pretending I don't love you. Later. After she'd made tea, he didn't drink, and he'd told her about Emma, his daughter, 20 years old, junior at Northwestern. Completely unaware her father had apparently lost his mind over the past 8 months, she laughed, really laughed. The low, reluctant sound he'd driven cross-country and across an ocean for without fully understanding why. "She's going to think this is hilarious," Lydia said. "Emma thinks everything I do is either hilarious or embarrassing. This is both." "Yeah," he smiled. "Yeah, it is." It was close to midnight. The wind had picked up outside. She'd turned on the lamp by the drafting table, and the room had that particular amber quality that good rooms get late at night when the rest of the world has gone quiet. "Stay," she said. "The couch pulls out. You know where the blankets are." He knew exactly where the blankets were. He'd slept on that couch 6 times in 12 years. He knew which drawer had the spare toothbrushes and that the shower pressure was better if you turned the handle slightly past, where it felt natural, and that she kept an extra phone charger behind the left speaker on her bookshelf. He knew all of it. He'd just never let himself think about what that meant. "Okay," he said. She took the envelope from the cushion between them, looked at it for a moment. Then she folded it in half and slipped it into the pocket of her sweater. "Get some sleep," she said. "We have a lot to figure out." "We do," he said. She stood, moved toward the hallway, paused in the doorway. "Ethan." "Yeah." She looked at him. There were 12 years in that look. Every late-night call. Every hard season. Every time they'd been in the same room, and both felt something they hadn't named. All of it, right there on her face. "I'm glad you came back early," she said. He held her gaze. "Me too," he said. She went to bed. And Ethan Cole lay on the pull-out couch in Lydia Harper's apartment, in the dark, in Chicago, staring at the ceiling, not sleeping, not even trying with the quiet, unsteady, enormous feeling of a man who has spent years building a wall around the most important room in his house, and has just, finally, opened the door. He didn't sleep. Not even close. Ethan lay on the pull-out couch with his eyes open, and the city doing what Chicago does at night, pressing in through the windows with all its noise and cold and indifference. And he thought about 12 years. 12 years is a long time. Long enough to forget who you were before someone. Long enough that the absence of that person, even for 8 months, doesn't feel like missing someone. It feels like missing a limb. He'd been telling himself the limb for metaphor was about friendship. He understood now, at 11:53 in the morning on the first night back, staring at a water stain on Lydia Harper's ceiling, that he had been lying to himself with considerable skill and dedication for the better part of a decade. He thought about the first time he'd met her. Not the way people romanticize first meetings in hindsight, packaging them up with meaning that wasn't there in the moment. He remembered it the way it actually happened, which was not romantic at all. He'd been 45 years old, newly divorced, dropping Emma off at her mother's for the weekend, and had walked into the wrong meeting room at a creative agency in River North because he'd written down the wrong floor. He'd ended up standing in the doorway of a client pitch with his portfolio under his arm, looking like a man who had genuinely no idea where he was or how he'd gotten there. Lydia had been at the head of the table. She'd looked up at him, looked at his portfolio, looked at the confused expression he was certain was spread across his entire face, and said, with perfect calm, "Wrong room, right building, 3rd floor, 2nd door on the left. And if you're the photographer for the Whitmore account, you're 12 minutes late, so move quickly," he'd said. "I'm not the photographer for the Whitmore account," she'd said. "Then who are you?" He'd said his name. She'd looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then she'd said, "Close the door on your way out." He had. And he'd stood in the hallway, laughing quietly to himself for reasons he couldn't entirely explain, and then gone to find the actual meeting room, and not thought about her again for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, He'd gotten a call from a number he didn't recognize. A woman's voice. "This is Lydia Harper. I saw your work in the Meridian Gallery show last Saturday. I'd like to discuss a contract." That was how it started. Not with electricity, not with music, with a wrong room and a gallery show and a phone call that sounded like a business meeting. The friendship had built itself the way real friendships do, slowly, sideways through the accumulation of small things. A shared lunch that ran 3 hours because neither of them noticed the time. A conversation about his divorce that he hadn't meant to start and couldn't stop once it began. A night she'd called him from outside a hospital where her mother was being treated, her voice completely steady in that way. That meant she was 2 minutes from not being steady at all, and he'd driven across the city at 10 p.m. without her having to ask. He'd sat with her in that waiting room until 2 in the morning. They'd talked about everything except what was happening. Books, bad movies, a road trip she'd taken at 24 that had gone wrong in every possible way and had produced stories she still laughed about. He'd talked about a photography assignment in New Orleans that had accidentally turned into a week-long immersion in a Mardi Gras parade circuit. She'd laughed. He'd made her laugh on purpose, again and again, until she'd finally fallen asleep in the chair beside him, with her head tilted against the wall. He remembered looking at her face when she was asleep and feeling something shift in his chest. He'd filed it under. Irrelevant. Too complicated. Not the right time. He'd been filing things under that same category for 11 more years. The couch creaked when he shifted positions. Somewhere in the apartment, the refrigerator hummed. Down the hallway, behind a closed door. Lydia was presumably also not sleeping. He had no evidence of this. He just knew her. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. What he kept coming back to, what kept circling back around, no matter which direction his thoughts went, was the simplicity of it. That was the part that undid him. Not the drama of the kiss. Not the 7 words in the envelope. Not even the conversation they'd had on the couch, with the Thai food growing cold between them. It was the simplicity of how obvious it was now, and how completely he had missed it, or refused to see it, or seen it and run. He had left for Barcelona. That was the real truth. The one he'd admitted to her, but hadn't fully admitted to himself yet. He hadn't gone to Barcelona for the contract. The contract had been an excuse, a good one, legitimate, well-paying, the kind of international work that looked exactly right on a portfolio, but an excuse nonetheless. He had taken it because staying in Chicago had started to feel like standing at the edge of something he wasn't ready to fall into. 6 years ago, at Emma's high school graduation party, he'd been standing by the food table, watching Lydia talk to his sister across the yard. She'd been wearing a yellow dress. That detail was irrelevant, and he had never stopped remembering it. She'd been laughing at something, his sister said, and the late June light had been doing what late June light does. And Ethan had been standing there with a paper plate and a plastic cup, and had felt something so clear and so large move through him that he'd had to set down his drink and take a slow breath. He'd looked away. He'd gone and found Emma and hugged her and told her how proud he was. He had not allowed himself to return to the feeling by the food table. 6 years later, lying on a pull-out couch in the dark, he understood that he'd been making that same choice over and over. Look away. Put it down. Go find something else to hold until Barcelona. Until that phone call. Until the words, "Do you ever think about hanging in the air with nowhere to go?" He heard her door open. He didn't move. Footsteps in the hallway. Then a pause. Then the kitchen quiet sounds. The tap, the soft click of the cabinet. He sat up. "You're awake too," he said, not loudly. A beat. "What gave it away?" she said from the kitchen. "It's quiet when you sleep. You have a specific..." He stopped. She appeared in the doorway. "A specific what?" "You have a specific silence when you're actually asleep. The apartment sounds different." She looked at him for a long moment. "You know what my sleeping silence sounds like. I've slept on this couch 6 times, Lydia. I know. I'm not saying it's strange." She paused. I'm saying it's the kind of thing you notice about someone when you're paying more attention to them than you're admitting. He didn't argue with that. She came and sat at the other end of the couch. She'd changed into sweatpants and an old Northwestern sweatshirt, Emma's University, which she'd bought as a joke when Emma had gotten in, and which had somehow migrated to her permanent rotation. She had a glass of water in one hand. "What are you thinking about?" she said. "The graduation party," he said. "Emma's, 6 years ago." She was quiet for a moment. "The yellow dress," she said. He looked at her. "I knew," she said simply, "when you walked away. I saw it on your face first, and then you walked away, and I thought—" She stopped. "Set the glass down on the coffee table." I thought, "Okay, he's not ready. Maybe he'll never be ready. Maybe this is just maybe I'm seeing something that isn't there." It was there. I know that now. It was there then too. She pulled her knees up to her chest, made herself smaller on the couch, the way she always did when she was getting ready to say something honest. "I know that too. I've known for a long time. But knowing and doing are," she exhaled through her nose. "You know how far apart those two things can be." He did know. He knew precisely. "Tell me about Barcelona," she said. "The real version. Not the one you told your agency." He leaned back against the cushion behind him, thought about how to say it accurately. "The first 3 months were good," he said. "The work was good. The project was real. The refugee resettlement documentation. I mean, that mattered. I was inside something that mattered. And it was enough to keep the other stuff quiet. The other stuff meaning me. The other stuff meaning you." She nodded slowly, like she was taking inventory. "And then," she said, "and then it got quieter. The project wound down. I had more time. More time means more," he searched for the word. "More space for whatever you've been keeping in the corner." And I was in the corner. You were in the corner. You were in the corner the whole time, actually. You don't stop being in the corner just because you get on a plane. I thought that was how it worked. Turns out I was wrong about that. She almost smiled. "You're usually wrong about the emotional stuff and right about everything technical. It's one of your defining characteristics. That's fair. I'm not being mean. I know. It's accurate." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car passed, and its headlights swept across the ceiling in a slow arc. "I went on 2 dates," she said, "while you were gone." He didn't say anything, just waited. The first one was with a man named Derek, who worked in urban planning and had very strong opinions about Chicago's zoning laws, which is not the worst quality in a person. But she shook her head. I kept comparing. The whole dinner, not on purpose, but you know how your brain just it holds something up next to something else and makes a judgment before you ask it to. What were you comparing? The way he talked. He talked at me, not with me. You've never talked at me. She picked up her water glass, set it back down without drinking. And the second date was worse, because he was actually good, kind, funny, asked real questions. And I came home from dinner, and I sat down at my desk, and I felt nothing. I felt like I'd been to a very professional presentation that had nothing to do with my actual life. When was this? April, about 4 months after you left. He did the math. April. He'd been in the middle of a particularly demanding month of fieldwork, traveling between Valencia and Bilbao, with a local fixer named Tomas, who barely slept. He remembered April because it had been physically exhausting and emotionally flat, and he'd attributed the flatness to fatigue. He understood now that he'd been thinking about her in April without calling it that. "I deleted the dating app after the second date," she said. "I told myself I was just focused on work. I was, actually. But that wasn't the whole reason." "What was the whole reason?" She looked at him directly. "Because every time I pictured what I actually wanted, not what I thought I should want, not what made sense in for a woman who's almost 52 and runs her own company and has her life reasonably together, it was you. It kept being you. And I couldn't figure out if that was because you were the right answer, or Because I was too afraid to let anyone else be the answer. The apartment was very quiet. Is that why you almost told me on the phone? He said. 6 weeks ago. Yes, she looked at her hands. I'd been going back and forth for weeks, and that night you called from the studio. You sounded tired, but the good kind, focused. And we were talking and I thought, I'm going to say it. I'm going to just say it, and let whatever happens happen. And then I got scared. Scared of what? Of everything. She said it simply, without drama. Scared that you didn't feel the same way. Scared that you did feel the same way, and it would change everything. Scared that we'd try, and it would break us. Scared that if I said it out loud, it would stop being this safe private thing I carried around and start being something real that could go wrong. He understood every word of that. He understood it from the inside. The letter, he said. The 7 words. I'd been trying to write that letter for 3 months. Every draft kept turning into paragraphs and pages, and it was too much. Too many explanations, too many qualifications. And then one night I just sat down, and the only thing I could write that felt true was those 7 words. So I stopped there. I can't keep pretending I don't love you. She nodded. He let the words sit in the room for a moment. Let them be real. You said you were going to either mail it or burn it, he said. Which were you leaning toward? She thought about it. Actually thought about it. Which he appreciated. I think, she said slowly, I was leaning toward burning it. Because mailing, it meant I had to survive the waiting. And waiting for your response, not knowing what you'd say, having it out there in the world. You having read it somewhere in Barcelona. And me being here, I don't think I could have stood that. So what stopped you from burning it? She paused. Long enough that he thought she wasn't going to answer. I kept thinking about my mother, she said finally. He went still. Lydia's mother, Carol Harper, had died 2 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to end. Lydia had handled it the way she handled most hard things, with extraordinary competence and very little outward collapse, which meant the grief had been quiet and internal and enormous, and Ethan had done his best to stay close to it without pressing. He had driven her to the hospice 12 times. He had sat with her at the kitchen table the night her mother died, both of them not talking, until the sky got light. She knew, Lydia said. Her voice was level, but carefully so, about you, about how I felt. I never told her explicitly, but she knew because she was my mother, and mothers know things. And in the last few weeks, when we were having the conversations you have at the end, when she was saying the things she wanted to say, she told me not to spend my life keeping myself safe. He didn't speak. She said, Lydia, you have built the most beautiful fence around your heart, and everything inside it is in perfect condition. And you are the only one who can see it. She stopped, swallowed. I argued with her, obviously. I said I wasn't. I said that wasn't what I was doing. And she just looked at me and said, he came to that hospital at 10 o'clock at night, and he stayed until 2 in the morning. And you haven't told him. That was all she said. Ethan felt something move through his chest that he didn't have a name for. You never told me that, he said. No. Why not? She looked at him. Because it would have meant telling you the rest. He pressed his hands flat against his thighs. He was an emotional man. Had always been. It was what made him a good photographer. The capacity to feel the weight of things, and right now, the weight was considerable. Your mom liked me, he said. My mom loved you. She called you the good one. Lydia's voice caught, just slightly, and then steadied. She said, that man is the good one. Lydia, they're rare, and they don't wait forever. And I told her she was being dramatic, and she said, I'm dying of cancer. I've earned dramatic. He laughed, unexpected and sudden. Lydia laughed too, the low, reluctant sound. The laughter faded, and the apartment held the particular quiet that comes after something honest. I think about her, Ethan said, more than I've told you. I know you do. I think she would have had thoughts about tonight. Oh, she would have had thoughts. Lydia's expression shifted into something warm and sad at the same time. She would have said something absolutely mortifying, and then looked deeply satisfied about it. He smiled. Yeah. They sat there for a moment in the comfortable mess of grief and relief, and 12 years and one night. And Ethan thought about how this was the thing people never understood about love. That grew from friendship, the texture of it, the way it had whole rooms built inside it already, furnished with shared history and accumulated knowing, so that when you finally walked in through the real door, it didn't feel like a strange place. It felt like coming home to a house you'd been living next door to for 12 years. And then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it out of habit. Emma. Dad. You said you were landing Thursday. Why is your phone showing Chicago local time since this afternoon? He stared at the screen. What? Lydia said. He turned the phone toward her. She read it. Her eyes went wide. She tracked your location. She set it up before I left. Said it was for safety. I forgot about it. He was already typing. She's 20 years old. Why is she awake at midnight on A? His phone rang. Emma. Calling. He answered. Hi, he said, with the measured calm of a man who has been caught. You're in Chicago. Emma's voice was not accusing. It was something more interesting than accusing. It was knowing, in the way that young women are sometimes knowing about their fathers in ways that fathers find entirely unsettling. You're in Chicago, and you didn't tell me you were coming back early. And it's midnight. And you're where exactly are you right now? I'm at. He stopped. Are you at Lydia's? The pause lasted 1 second, too long. Emma's voice, when it came back, had changed entirely. It was now the voice of a 20-year-old who has just had an extremely satisfying hypothesis confirmed. Oh my God, she said. Emma. Oh my God, Dad. Lydia had her face in her hands. It's not we're just talking, Ethan said, which was true and also, in the full context of the evening, deeply incomplete. It's midnight. You flew back from Barcelona without telling anyone. You went straight to Lydia's, and it's midnight. A pause. I'm going to need you to explain what part of that is. Just talking. The talking part is the part where we're currently talking. You are unbelievable. I came back early because... Dad. Emma's voice had dropped the theatrical outrage. This was her real voice, the one that sounded uncomfortably often like her mother, steady and direct and slightly smarter than the situation required. I've been watching you not be honest about Lydia for approximately 6 years. I have been waiting 6 years for you to figure this out. I'm not kidding. I have talked about this with my roommate. I have talked about this with Grandma Janet. I have talked about this with Mom. He froze. You talked about it with your mother. Mom said, and I'm quoting, if your father would just talk to that woman, he'd stop looking like somebody who left his keys inside a locked car. That 4. He had absolutely no response to that. She's there, isn't she? Emma said. Lydia's there. You're talking to her right now. I'm not going to. Say hi for me. Lydia, who had clearly heard everything, made a sound that was half law and half surrender. She says hi, Ethan said. Tell her I think she's great. And I've always thought she was great. And if she hasn't told you, that you're an oblivious disaster of a person. Someone needed to. I'm not relaying that. She heard me, didn't she? She heard everything. Your volume is. Good, I'm going to sleep now. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Actually, he could hear the grin in her voice. Do whatever seems right. I support it completely. A pause. Good night, Dad. I'm really glad you came home. The call ended. He set the phone down on the cushion between them. Lydia was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully categorize. 6 years, she said. Your daughter, your ex-wife, your mother. Apparently, were we the last 2 people to know? He thought about Marcus, who had said to him before he left for Barcelona, Ethan, I say this with love. Man, you are doing a thing right now. And you know what the thing is. He had denied knowing what the thing was. Marcus had looked at him with the patience of a man who had served 2 tours and raised 3 kids, and was not remotely fooled. "Probably," he said. She shook her head slowly. "We're both very intelligent people. In most areas. In this area, we were genuinely terrible." "Genuinely terrible," he agreed. She leaned her head back against the cushion. The room was still, and the city was doing its low background hum, and Ethan was aware with the specific, clear-eyed awareness of a man who had spent his career looking at things directly, that something had permanently shifted, that there was no version of tomorrow in which things went back to the arrangement they'd held for 12 years. The shape of it was gone. What was here instead was bigger and more complicated. And if he was being honest with himself, which he was trying to be, tonight more than ever better. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah. When you pictured coming back, when you were on the plane, thinking about what you were going to say, what were you most afraid of?" He didn't have to think about it. "That you'd be kind about it," he said. She turned her head to look at him. "That you'd hear it," he said. "And you'd be gentle and careful, and say all the right things about how much you valued us, what we had, the friendship, and that you'd basically let me down in the nicest possible way. Because that's how Lydia Harper handles hard things. She's very good at being kind." And I thought he stopped, restarted. I thought the kindness would kill me. More than a flat no, the gentle version of no. She was very still. "I wasn't planning to be kind," she said. "I know that now. I was planning to either fall apart or finally stop pretending. I hadn't decided which." She looked at the ceiling, "And then you were standing there. And the mug was it was in my hand. And then it wasn't. And somehow, that was the decision. That was my body deciding before my brain caught up." "What was the decision?" "To stop protecting the friendship more than I was protecting myself." She said it quietly. "I'd been so worried about breaking what we had. 12 years, that's not nothing. You don't find that again. And I was so convinced that telling you would risk it. But at some point, somewhere between April and that phone call, and writing those 7 words, and not being able to either send it or burn it." She stopped. "I realized that what I was actually breaking, by not saying anything, was myself." The clock on her bookshelf showed 12:47. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Ethan said, carefully, "There's something I haven't told you." She turned to look at him, wary but not closed. "Okay. I have been looking at apartments," he said. "In Seattle." The room went absolutely still. "Seattle," she repeated, "for about a month. Before I ended the contract. I was researching. In a way that I was telling myself was professional, that it made sense to have a base on the West Coast. Expand the portfolio. The light out there is." He stopped. "I was looking at Seattle apartments, because you went to that conference in September, and you came back. And you said it was the most alive you'd felt creatively in years, and you said the design community there was extraordinary, and I thought." He stopped again. "You thought what?" she said. Her voice was very quiet. "I thought, if she ever went to Seattle," he said, "I would follow." She stared at him. He held her gaze. "You were already planning," she said, slowly. Like she needed to hear the words in the air to believe them. "You were in Barcelona researching apartments in Seattle, because I went to a conference. I was in Barcelona trying to talk myself out of researching apartments in Seattle." "There's a difference. That is not as large a difference as you think it is." "No," he admitted, "it's not." She stood up. He watched her cross to the window, arms folded, looking out at nothing visible, just the dark and the lights and the city moving below. "This is a lot," she said, to the window. "I know. 12 years and now it's." She stopped. "It's a lot in one night." "It is. I need to." She pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment, thinking. "I need to just sit with all of it for a second." "Okay. Not because I'm pulling back. I'm not pulling back. I just..." "Lydia." He waited until she turned from the window. "I've been waiting 6 years. I can wait until morning." She looked at him for a long moment. And then, for the second time that night, she said something that rearranged his entire understanding of the situation. The conference in Seattle, she said.
The reason I felt so alive there.
She paused. I'd already put in a preliminary inquiry about a contract. A year-long project with a firm there. Major work. The kind that doesn't come twice. He was very still. I haven't told anyone, she said. I haven't made a decision. But they contacted me last week, and they want an answer by the 15th. She looked at him steadily. Of next month. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that was about to happen next. The 15th of next month. Ethan turned that phrase over in his mind, the way you turn a stone in your hand, feeling the weight of it, the edges, trying to understand what it actually was, before you decided what to do with it. 18 days. She had 18 days to answer a contract that would take her to Seattle for a year, and she had said nothing to him, nothing to anyone, apparently, and she had been carrying it alone since last week, which meant she had been carrying it on top of everything else, on top of the letter she couldn't mail or burn, on top of the feeling she'd been managing with the careful, exhausting precision of a woman who had gotten very good at keeping large things inside small containers. He understood why she hadn't told him. He understood it perfectly, and it made something in him ache, in a specific way. How big is the project, he said. Big. She was still standing by the window, arms folded. It's a full brand identity and design system for a regional healthcare network. 14 months, possibly 18. The kind of work that she started again. It's the kind of work that would be the centerpiece of everything I've built. It would change what doors open after. And you haven't told anyone. I told my accountant because I needed to look at the numbers. That's it. Why not tell me? She turned from the window then, and her expression was complicated. In a way he had learned to read over 12 years, the particular combination of honesty and reluctance that meant she was about to say the real thing, instead of the easier thing. Because if I told you, she said, and then you told me how you felt, I would never know which thing I was deciding. Whether I was choosing Seattle because it was right for me, or choosing it to run away, or choosing Chicago because I genuinely wanted to stay, or choosing to stay because of you. He was quiet. I needed the decision to be mine first, she said, purely mine, before anything else got mixed into it. And now it's mixed into it. And now it's extremely mixed into it. She sat back down. Not at the far end this time. Closer. I'm not angry about that. That's not what I'm saying. I need you to understand that I wasn't hiding it from you to protect myself from this conversation. I was protecting the integrity of my own decision. I understand that. Do you? Lydia. He met her eyes. I left for an entire country to avoid making a decision. I'm the last person who's going to judge you for needing to separate things out. She exhaled. The held tension in her shoulders released by maybe 20%, which was, for Lydia, practically a collapse. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They sat with it for a moment. The clock moved. Outside, a siren passed and faded. Can I ask something? He said. You're going to anyway. What does your gut say? Not what's smart, not what's strategic, your gut. Right now, tonight. She didn't answer immediately, which meant she was taking it seriously. My gut says Seattle is the right move professionally, she said carefully. My gut has been saying that since September. The city, the project, the community, all of it pointed in one direction. And my gut has also been saying, for considerably longer, that I'm in love with a man who lives in Chicago. She looked at him directly, and those two things are now, as of tonight, in direct conversation with each other. He nodded slowly. He didn't try to solve it. He'd learned. Across 12 years and one marriage, and a lot of time in rooms with difficult realities, that the worst thing you could do with a problem, a person was genuinely to wrestling with, was try to solve it before they were ready to be solved. Then we'll figure it out, he said. It's not that simple. I didn't say it was simple. I said we'd figure it out. She looked at him for a long moment. When did you get calm about hard things? I'm not calm, I'm terrified. But I'm also very tired of making decisions based on fear. He held her gaze. So I'm choosing to say we'll figure it out, and mean it, and then actually do the work of figuring it out. She was quiet. Then she said, I need to sleep. Yeah. Not because I'm ending the conversation. I know. Because my brain is full, and if I stay up any later, I'm going to start crying. And I would prefer to do that, privately. Fair. She stood, looked at him for a moment, with an expression he couldn't fully name, something between exhausted and certain, which was an unusual combination, but made sense for her. Ethan. Yeah. I'm glad you came back early, she said again. He looked up at her. You said that already. I know. I wanted to say it again. She went to bed. He lay back down on the couch. This time, eventually, he slept. He dreamed about a yellow dress and a graduation party, and the specific quality of light on a June afternoon when you're standing at the edge of something you're not ready to fall into. He didn't look away this time. He woke up at 6:43 to the sound of her coffee grinder. The apartment was gray with early morning, that particular pre-8 quality of light that makes everything feel slightly unfinished. He lay still for a moment and let himself understand where he was and what day it was and what had happened the night before. And then he sat up and ran his hands through his hair and accepted that his life had fundamentally changed between yesterday afternoon and right now, and that this was a good thing, even though good things could also be terrifying. He folded the blanket, straightened the pullout, went to the kitchen doorway. She was standing at the counter in the same sweatpants and sweatshirt, waiting for the coffee, hair still up from sleep. She had her phone in one hand and was scrolling through something with the distracted focus of a person who is reading email before they're fully awake, which was one of her habits he had always mildly disapproved of and never mentioned. She looked up. Morning, she said. Morning. I made enough for two. I can see that. She looked at him for a moment. He looked at her. The kitchen was exactly the same as it always was. The same cabinet handles, the same slightly crooked corkboard on the wall with project notes pinned to it, the same chipped mug on the second hook from the left that she never used but never threw away because it had been her mother's. Everything the same. Everything completely different. So, she said. So, he said. Last night was. Yeah. A lot. Yeah. She poured 2 cups, handed him one. He took it, and they stood there, on opposite sides of the kitchen island, and drank coffee in the early morning quiet. I didn't cry, she said. I know. I thought I would. You're saving it for later. She looked up sharply. I know you, he said. She held his gaze for a moment, and then she almost smiled, the kind of almost smile that was its own complete communication. I have a 10 o'clock call, she said, with a client in Denver. After that, I have 2 internal check-ins and a design review at 3. Okay. I'm not trying to. Lydia, I know you have a life. I'm not expecting you to cancel your Tuesday. I have a guest room, she said. Actually, a guest room, not a couch. It's where Emma stays when she visits. She stopped. I mean, if you need a few days before you figure out. I'd like that, he said. She nodded, like that was settled. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen, and something in her face changed. Not drastically. Just a small tightening around the eyes that he'd learned to read as. This is complicated. She turned the phone slightly so he couldn't see the screen, and then caught herself doing it. And then, because Lydia Harper was not a woman who did things by accident twice, turned it back. The name on the screen was Richard Oates. She hit decline. He said nothing. She set the phone face down on the counter. Who's Richard Oates, he said. A beat. He's on the board. Of your agency. Yes. Why's he calling you at 7 in the morning? She picked up her coffee cup, set it down without drinking. He's been calling me since last week. About what? About the agency. She said it carefully. There have been some conversations at the board level about the agency's direction, about what the next 5 years look like. What kind of conversations? The kind that happen when an agency has been operating as a boutique creative firm for 11 years and has gotten successful enough that larger entities start to notice. She met his eyes. The kind where people start throwing around words like acquisition. The word landed in the room. Someone wants to buy your agency, he said. Someone wants to discuss buying my agency. There's a difference. Is there? She looked at him. Yes, because I haven't said yes to the discussion. She stopped. I've been avoiding the discussion. He put his cup down. Lydia. I know. So you have the Seattle contract, and you have a possible acquisition of your agency, and you've been handling both of those alone since last week. I know. What else? He said. She blinked. What? What else are you handling? Because in 12 years I've learned that when you go quiet about one thing, there's usually a second thing, and sometimes a third. He said it without accusation, just steadily. What else? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I had a health thing. The temperature in the room changed. A health thing, he repeated. His voice was very even. It's resolved. Before you, she held up a hand. It's resolved, and it's fine. And I was going to tell you, but it happened in October, when you were in the middle of the refugee documentation, and I didn't want to. What kind of health thing? Cardiac, a minor arrhythmia. I had a cardiology workup in October. They put me on a low-dose medication. Follow-up in January came back clear. She said it efficiently, like presenting project data. It's fine. He stood very still. You had a cardiac event, he said. A minor arrhythmia. In October. Yes. And I was in Barcelona. Yes. And you didn't tell me. She held his gaze. You were in the middle of important work, and it was minor, and it was handled. He turned away from her, faced the wall, took a slow breath. He turned back. Lydia, his voice was quiet. I want you to understand something. I'm not angry. I understand why you didn't want to worry me. I understand the logic of it. But I need you to hear me when I say that you having a cardiac event in October, even a minor one, even a resolved one, is something I needed to know about. Why? Because you matter to me. Not as a concept, not as a future conversation. You, specifically, your actual physical health, matters to me in a way that takes precedence over my work schedule. She looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes. You're not going to let me minimize this, she said. No. Most people let me minimize things. I'm aware. I've watched you do it for 12 years. He picked up his coffee. I'm done being one of those people. She was quiet. Then, very quietly, she said, I was scared. Of the arrhythmia. Of calling you. She looked at her hands. Of calling you and hearing in your voice how worried you were, and knowing I was going to be okay, but not being able to. She stopped. You were my person to call. You've always been my person to call. And I couldn't call you. Because if I called you, and you came back and it turned out to be nothing, then I would have brought you home from the other side of the world for nothing. And if it wasn't nothing, he said, I would have wanted to be there. I know. Her voice was barely above quiet. I would have wanted to be there, he said again. Not as a friend who checks in. There. In the room. That is where I would have wanted to be. She pressed her lips together. The thing she'd said about crying in private, he could see her managing against it, right now. I'm okay, she said. I know you're okay. He crossed the kitchen, set his cup down next to hers, stood close enough that she had to look up slightly. I'm still angry that I didn't know, not at you. Just angry in a general direction about time and distance, and all we spent too long pretending weren't what they were. That's fair, she said. It's also over, he said. That version of us, the one where you have a health scare in October, and you don't call me, that's over. She looked up at him. Okay, she said, one word. But the way she said it. His phone buzzed. Both of them looked at it on the counter. Marcus, calling. Your Marcus radar is impeccable, Lydia said. He picked it up. I'll call him back. No, go. I need to get ready for my 10 o'clock anyway. She picked up her cup. Use the bathroom first if you need it. Towels are in the left cabinet. She walked down the hallway. He stood in the kitchen, with Marcus' missed call on his screen and the smell of coffee in the air, and the weight of everything that had been said in the last 8 hours settling through him, like sediment through water, slowly, completely, changing the composition of what was at the bottom. He called Marcus back. You're in Chicago, Marcus said immediately. Good morning to you too. It's 7:15. You're in Chicago 3 weeks early, and you didn't tell me. A pause. You went to see her. Marcus, I just want you to say yes. Yes, Ethan said. A long pause, then Marcus exhaled a slow, deliberate breath that contained approximately 5 years of patience. Finally, he said, you don't know what happened. I know you're in Chicago, and you sound like a man who just got off a roller coaster and isn't sure if he wants to get back on or has already bought another ticket. A pause. Which is it? Ethan thought about the ticket metaphor. Already bought another ticket, he said. Good. Marcus's voice was simple and solid. That's good, Ethan. It's also complicated. It's always complicated. That's what makes it real. Another pause. Is she okay? He thought about what to say. She's more than I gave her credit for. You always gave her too little credit. You give everyone too little credit when you're trying not to want something from them. You've told me that before. I'll keep telling you until it stops being true. A beat. Have breakfast. Don't overthink. Call me when you're ready to talk it through. Okay, Ethan. Yeah. I mean it. Finally. He hung up. She came back 20 minutes later in work clothes, the kind of composed, put-together version of herself. That meant she had a full day ahead of her, and had made the internal decision to carry last night efficiently instead of dragging it into every hour. He had always admired that about her, the ability to compartmentalize without shutting down. She sat across from him at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her second cup of coffee, and she looked at him with the particular expression, something to say, and has been deciding how to ace it since she brushed her teeth. I've been thinking, she said. Already. I process fast when I'm nervous. She turned the laptop slightly to face him. On the screen was a page. He recognized a real estate listing site, Seattle. I had 3 tabs open when I woke up. He looked at the screen, then at her. You were already researching Seattle apartments, he said. Months ago, she said. Before last week's offer, even. I was already looking. She paused. Same way you were. He sat back. We were both researching apartments in Seattle, he said, at the same time. In different cities. Apparently. Without telling each other. Without telling each other. He pressed a hand over his face for a moment. Then he dropped it. We are. Ridiculous, she said. I was going to say something more charitable. No, you weren't. No, he agreed, I wasn't. She closed the laptop. Here's where I am this morning. Clearly and honestly. Okay. I want to take the Seattle contract. I've wanted to take it since the moment I read the proposal. The work is extraordinary, and the timing is right, and professionally, it is the correct decision. Okay. And I want this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, I want it. I'm not walking it back. Last night was not a mistake, and I'm not going to spend the next week second-guessing it, because second-guessing is what I do when I'm scared, and I'm trying to stop making decisions from fear. He held her gaze steadily. Okay, but I need to say this clearly. Her voice was level and direct in the way it got when she was running a client meeting and needed everyone in the room to understand the same thing simultaneously. I will not take Seattle to run from this, and I will not stay in Chicago for this. Whatever I decide has to be mine, not a reaction to what happened last night. I agree, he said. She blinked. You agree. Completely. I don't want you to make a decision about your career because of me. That would turn into resentment eventually, and I've been in a marriage where things turned into resentment, and I won't do that to you. She was quiet for a moment. You're being very reasonable about this. I'm terrified, he said again. But I meant what I said last night. I'm done making choices based on fear, and part of that is trusting that if you take Seattle and I'm in Chicago, that's not the end of this. How is it not the end of this? She said. Long distance at our age, after just because, he said. I will not let it be the end of this. She looked at him. I spent 6 years looking away, he said. I spent 8 months on another continent, and I came back, not because the planet aligned or the timing got perfect, because I made a choice. He leaned forward slightly. Lydia, I am making a choice. I am telling you, clearly, right now, that whatever geography looks like, I am choosing. You can take Seattle. You can take a contract on the moon. And I will figure out how to make the distance work until there isn't distance anymore. Because you are not an almost thing in my life. You are not a good enough, or a convenient, or a we'll see. You are the thing. She was very still. Say something, he said. I'm trying not to cry in the kitchen, she said. I told myself I was saving that for privately. The kitchen counts as private. You're in the kitchen. I've seen you cry before. This is different. She pressed her fingers to her mouth briefly. Steed. This is different, because those times I was crying about things that were broken, and this time she stopped. This time, he said gently. This time I'm crying about something that isn't broken, she said. And that's a new experience for me, and I'm not sure what to do with it. He reached across the table. She looked at his hand. She took it. They sat like that for a moment, him holding her hand across the kitchen table in the early morning light. Coffee going cold, laptop closed. Tuesday beginning outside the window with its ordinary demands. Then her phone rang again. Richard Oates. She looked at it. Looked at Ethan. I need to take this, she said. Take it, she answered. Put it on speaker, which she didn't have to do, but did. He understood that it was intentional, that she was letting him in. Richard, she said. Lydia. Richard Oates had the voice of a 60-year-old man who was used to being listened to, smooth, measured, accustomed to control. I've been trying to reach you. I know, I've had a busy few days. I understand. I'll be brief. A pause. The Vantage Group has moved up their timeline. They want to have a preliminary conversation before the end of the month, which means I need to know where you stand before I can tell them anything. Richard, I haven't made any decisions. I understand that, but Lydia, I want to be direct with you. His tone shifted slightly. The offer is substantial. The terms are favorable, and the board's feeling is that this window may not stay open indefinitely. Vantage is looking at 2 other firms. Ethan watched her face. She was listening, processing, not reacting. What exactly does the board want from me? She said. We want you to take the meeting, Richard said. That's all. Just take the meeting. And if I take the meeting, and I'm not interested, then we'll have more information than we do now. A pause. You've built something remarkable, Lydia. That's exactly why they want it. The question is what you want. She looked at Ethan. He said nothing, kept his expression open. I'll think about it, she said. I'll have an answer for you by Thursday. A pause on Richard's end, like he'd expected more resistance, or less composure, or something other than what he got. Thursday, he said. That works. Thank you, Lydia. She hung up. The kitchen was quiet. An acquisition meeting, Ethan said.
Yes.
On top of the Seattle contract. Yes. He let that sit for a moment. Then. Someone wants to buy the thing you built. Apparently. How do you feel about that? She was quiet for a moment. I feel like the universe has very poor timing. He almost laughed. Lydia, he kept hold of her hand. If someone buys your agency, then I'm not the boss anymore. Then I don't have a company to run in Chicago. She looked at him steadily. Then the thing tying me to this city is considerably less fixed. The implication settled over both of them. "You're not doing this because of me," he said carefully. "I'm not doing anything yet. I'm taking a meeting, and I'm thinking, she stopped. "I'm trying very hard to make sure that everything I do in the next 3 weeks is a decision I'm making, not a reaction I'm having. That's the right way to do it. It's the hard way to do it. Those are frequently the same thing." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Sat back. He could see her reorganizing, putting the morning into its compartments, making space for the tick-o'clock call, and the design review and the rest of the life that was still moving at its normal speed around the edges of this extraordinary interruption. "I need to work," she said. "I know. Will you be okay here? I have calls to make, my own life to inform that I have returned to it." He pushed back from the table. "Emma's probably texted 6 more times." "She texted me," Lydia said. He stopped. "Emma texted you. At 7:05. She turned the phone and showed him. The text said, "Please tell my dad that whatever's happening is good, and he should stop overthinking, and also I love you, Lydia, you're the best, and also hi." He read it twice. "My daughter," he said, "is excellent." Lydia finished. He shook his head slowly. "She's been rooting for this. Everyone has been rooting for this, Ethan. We were genuinely the last to know." He stood, took both cups to the sink, rinsed them the way she'd taught him, without realizing she was teaching him. Left faucet. Cold water, quick rinse, upside down on the rack. She watched him do it. "You know how I like the cups done," she said. "I know a lot about you," he said. "I know." Her voice was quiet. "I think that's why this took so long. Because it was already so." She searched for the word. "So full. What we already had. It felt like adding something would overflow it. And now." She looked at him across the kitchen. The morning had settled into itself around them. Her 10 o'clock was 2 hours away. His life in Chicago, technically, started again today. "Now," she said. "I think I had the math wrong. I think it doesn't overflow." She paused. "I think it just becomes what it was always supposed to be." His phone buzzed again. Both of them looked at it. Not Emma, not Marcus. A number he didn't recognize. Barcelona area code. He frowned. Answered. Mr. Cole, a woman's voice. Younger, professional, slight accent. "This is Marta Solar, from the Meridian Documentation Project. I'm calling because there's been a development with the archive materials, specifically regarding the final series you submitted before your contract ended." "What kind of development?" A pause on the line. "Mr. Cole, one of the photographs from your final submission, the one filed under the Refugee Resettlement Series, the portrait series from Valencia, has been selected by the International Press Photography Committee for their annual recognition program. It's been shortlisted." He went very still. "Shortlisted," he repeated. "Yes, sir." The committee reviewed the full submission, and one image in particular, the one you titled simply "Waiting," has been selected for the top 3. The announcement is December 15th, but they need confirmation of your participation and availability by the end of this week. He looked at Lydia. She had heard. Her eyes were wide and very bright. "I'll confirm," he said. "Send the details to my email." He hung up. The kitchen was absolutely quiet. "The photography award," she said. "Ethan. It's a short list. It's not. It's the International Press Photography Committee," she said. "Ethan. That's not a small thing." He set the phone down, ran a hand through his hair, felt the particular vertigo of too much happening in too short a window. Like standing in the center of a room where every wall is moving simultaneously. "If I win," he said slowly, "there are obligations, exhibitions, interviews. The kind of visibility that could take you anywhere," she said. "Yes." She looked at him. He looked at her. 2 people standing in a kitchen on a Tuesday morning in November, with a year-long contract in Seattle, and a possible acquisition, and a photography shortlist, and 18 days, and all the rest of it pressing in from every direction. "We're not simple," he said. "We were never simple," she said. "We just thought the complication was the reason to stay back. Maybe it was always the reason too. She stopped. The look on her face shifted. He watched it happen, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but with the particular quality of a person arriving at something true. "What?" he said. She shook her head slowly, not dismissing, more like something clicking. "I just thought of something," she said. "Say it." "The Seattle contract." She looked at him carefully. "The healthcare firm." "They're not just a healthcare firm. They're a network. Regional. Yes, but with two major nodes." She paused. "One in Seattle. And the other." She held his gaze. "Vancouver," she said. He went still. "Vancouver," he repeated. "Which is a 4-hour drive from Seattle. Or a 50-minute flight." She said it carefully. "And which has one of the strongest photojournalism markets on the West Coast. And which several people in your field have recently." "Lydia, I'm not saying it's a solution. I'm saying it's a possibility," he said. "It's a possibility," she agreed. They looked at each other across the kitchen. Everything was uncertain. The contract, the acquisition, the shortlist, the distance, the 18 days, the years that had already passed, and the ones that were still ahead. All of it uncertain. And somehow, for the first time in a very long time, that didn't feel like a reason to stand back. It felt like the beginning of something. They were finally going to stop running from. Her laptop chimed. The 10 o'clock pre-call notification. "I have to work," she said. "I know. This conversation isn't over." "Not even close," he said. She looked at him one more moment. Then she picked up her laptop and walked toward the living room. And just before she rounded the corner, she stopped and said, without turning around, "For the record, the 7 words, I meant everyone." He stood in the kitchen alone. Outside, Chicago kept moving. Inside, everything was still. And Ethan Cole, for the first time in 6 years, was not looking away. He stayed 3 days. That had not been the plan there, hadn't been a plan. Exactly. Which was itself unusual for a man who had spent 20 years building a career around logistics and timing, and knowing precisely where the light would fall before it fell. But those 3 days happened the way real things happen. Not by design, but by accumulation. One morning became lunch, became a walk along the lakefront in the cold, because Lydia said she needed air, and he said he'd come along. And then it was evening, and neither of them had suggested he leave, so he didn't. The guest room was exactly what she'd said. It was a proper room, with a real bed and a window that faced east, and a closet that still had 2 of Emma's sweaters in it from her last visit. He slept well in it, better than he'd slept in Barcelona in months, which told him something he'd already known, but hadn't been ready to say out loud. The 3 days were not romantic in any cinematic sense. They were domestic. They were the kind of days that reveal more about 2 people than any first kiss or confessed. Feeling the daily texture of existing in the same space, making coffee at the same time, working at opposite ends of the apartment with the particular comfortable silence of people who don't need to fill every moment with noise. He learned things he hadn't known. He learned that she got up at 5:45 on workdays, regardless of what time she'd gone to sleep. He learned that she kept a small notepad by the bathroom sink and sometimes wrote things on it in the night fragments, ideas, lines she didn't want to lose. He learned that she ate lunch standing up at the kitchen counter while reading something and genuinely didn't notice she was doing it. He learned that she had a habit, when a call went badly, of going very quiet for exactly 3 minutes afterward before she started problem solving, and that the 3 minutes were non-negotiable and should not be interrupted. She learned things too. On the second morning, she'd watched him make eggs and said, "You narrate while you cook. You know that. I don't narrate." You said out loud to no one, "Okay, medium heat, not too fast." That's not narrating. That's managing the process. Out loud, to yourself. It's a technique. She had laughed, the low, reluctant one. He'd made a mental note to keep cooking. On the 3rd evening, They sat on her couch after dinner, and she put on a documentary about deep-sea exploration that neither of them was fully watching. And somewhere around the 40-minute mark, she had put her feet up. She had put her feet up and leaned against his shoulder. And he had not moved, and they had sat like that for an hour and a half, in the particular stillness of two people who have finally stopped pretending that this was not exactly where they wanted to be. Nothing else happened. He understood that the nothing else was intentional on both their parts, not withholding, not playing it safe, more like. They had been waiting 12 years, and they understood instinctively that there was no rush now, that the ground needed time to settle after the shift, before you started building on it. On the morning of the fourth day, he went home. Not because she asked him to, not because anything was wrong, because he had an apartment of his own 8 blocks away that he hadn't been inside in 8 months, and an inbox that had been professionally patient but was running out of patience, and a daughter who had sent 14 texts in 3 days, ranging from supportive to gleeful, to one that simply said, "Dad, please just be happy." And because some part of him understood that the right way to start this was not to never leave her apartment. She walked him to the door. "Call me tonight," she said. "I will. Not as a check-in. I mean actually call. Talk for a while." He picked up his bag, looked at her in the doorway. "Lydia, I've been calling you for 12 years. That part isn't changing." She nodded, held the door open. He went to kiss her cheek, the way he had 100 times. She turned her head. He kissed her properly, briefly, standing in the doorway with his bag over his shoulder, and then pulled back and looked at her. "Thursday," she said. "Richard Oates." "I know. And the Seattle deadline is the 15th. "I know. And the photography committee wants your confirmation by Friday," he said. "I'm handling it." She looked at him. "You're not scared." "I'm completely scared," he said. "I'm also still here." He paused. "Those two things can be true at the same time." She let out a slow breath. "Yeah," she said, "they can." He left. He walked the 8 blocks home in the November cold, with his bag on his shoulder and his hands in his pockets. And he felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a man walking toward something rather than away. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it in March, clean, because he'd cleaned before he left, but with the particular staleness of a space that had been breathed out of for 8 months. He opened 2 windows despite the cold, let the air move through, stood in the middle of his living room, and looked at the walls covered in his work photographs, contact sheets, test prints, thought about how different this room looked to a man who had just spent 3 days understanding what he actually wanted. He called Emma. She answered on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "Tell me everything," she said. "Good morning to you too. Dad. I have waited 6 years for this phone call. I am not doing small talk." He sat down on the couch, told her. Not everything. There were things that were Lydia's to keep, but the shape of it. The returning early, the door, the letter, the 3 days, the conversation about Seattle. Emma was quiet through most of it in a way that was unusual for her. When he finished, she said. The letter said 7 words. "Yes. And you're not going to tell me what they were?" "No." A pause. Was it something good? "It was something true," he said. "Which is better." Another pause, and then Emma said, with a clarity that still casually startled him, coming from his 20-year-old daughter. "Dad, are you going to let this be real this time?" He understood what she was asking, not about logistics or Seattle or distances. She was asking whether he was going to do the thing he'd spent 6 years not doing, which was fully arrive. Be fully present in a thing that mattered instead of keeping 1 foot outside the door. "Yes," he said. "Promise me." "Emma, I'm serious. Promise me." "I promise you," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay, good. Now tell me about the photography shortlist, because I looked it up, and Dad, that committee is like the serious one, and I need to." "How did you know about the shortlist?" A pause that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. Lydia may have texted me, Emma said. He pressed a hand over his face. She texted you. She texted me congratulations, and also I think she's proud of you, and also you should know that before I could respond.
She sent a follow-up that said, please don't tell him I told you, and so technically I am betraying her trust right now. And I feel fine about it.
He sat with that for a moment. The image of Lydia texting his daughter about his photography shortlist, privately. Before he was even out of the building, something in his chest did a specific thing that he didn't have language for. I'll let you know how the shortlist turns out, he said. You better. A pause. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kid. He hung up. Sat in the quiet of his apartment for a moment, then opened his email and started working through the inbox. 3 days passed. Thursday arrived. He knew Lydia had the meeting with Richard Oates at 2 o'clock because she had told him, and he knew she was nervous because she had called him Wednesday night and talked about everything except the meeting for 45 minutes before finally saying, I'm nervous about tomorrow. And he had said, I know, and she had said, is that obvious? And he had said, only to someone who knows you. And she had said, that's not a small category. And he had said, actually, it's a category of one. She had gone quiet for a moment. Then she had said, good night, Ethan, in the voice that meant something had landed. He texted her at 2:15, just, I'm here if you need to talk after. She didn't text back until 4:47. Call me. He called her immediately. Tell me, he said. She was quiet for 3 seconds. He'd learned that her silences had different qualities. This one was not the managed kind, not the professional kind. It was the kind that meant she was deciding where to start. Because there was too much to start from. They want to buy the agency, she said. Not the concept of buying it. They want to actually buy it. Richard had numbers, actual numbers, on paper with a structure attached. A pause. It's a good offer. Ethan, it's a genuinely good offer. Okay. The terms are, they want to retain me as creative director for 2 years. My team stays, the clients stay. The work stays. She stopped. It stops being mine. He said nothing. Let her have the space. I built that agency from 11 years of, frankly, terrifying choices, she said. I went into debt twice. I lost a major client in year 3 that nearly ended everything. I hired people I believed in before I could afford to believe in them. And it works. It works because of all of that. A pause. And now someone wants to pay me a very significant amount of money to own the thing I built. How do you feel? I feel like I want to throw up, and also like I might be making a very big decision based on factors that have nothing to do with the offer. He understood exactly what she meant. The Seattle contract. The Seattle contract. And she stopped. And other factors. Meaning me. Meaning the general upheaval of the last 4 days. Yes. He got up from his desk, moved to the window. Lydia. What would you think about the offer if none of the rest of it had happened? If it was 6 months ago and I was still in Barcelona and nothing had changed, what would you think about it then? A long pause. 6 months ago, she said slowly, I would have said no immediately, because the agency was the center of everything. It was the structure around which my whole life was organized, and the idea of it not being mine would have been. She stopped. But 6 months ago, I was also performing a version of fine that I wasn't actually feeling. And now I'm not sure the agency needs to be the center anymore. Her voice was careful. Honest in the way it got, when she was working against her own instinct to be reassuring. I think for a long time I made the agency the thing I loved most, because it was the safest thing to love. It wouldn't leave. It wouldn't change on me. It wouldn't ask me to be vulnerable. He heard what she wasn't saying. And you're ready to love something that might ask for that, he said. She didn't answer right away. I'm trying to be, she said. That's not nothing. I know. A pause. I didn't say yes to Richard. I told him I needed 2 weeks. Good. He pushed back. Said 2 weeks was longer than they wanted to wait. What did you say? I said I'd built the thing they wanted to buy over 11 years. And I thought 2 weeks was a reasonable amount of time to decide whether to sell it. A beat, he said, fair enough. Good. Ethan, her voice shifted slightly. I need to tell you something. Okay. The Seattle contract. I talked to the firm today. I told them I was still interested, but that I had some personal circumstances that were in flux, and asked if there was flexibility on the start date. He waited. They said yes, she said. They can push the start to February, which gives me time to make the agency decision. And time too, she stopped. Time to not make all of this happen at once. He leaned against the window frame. Outside, the city was going about its Thursday business, indifferent and continuous. You bought yourself time, he said. I bought us time, she said. I'm not pretending I didn't do it partly for that reason. Partly. The rest of it is genuinely needing to make good decisions in sequence, rather than all simultaneously. A pause. But partly, yes. He closed his eyes for a moment, opened them. Thank you for telling me that, he said. I told you I was going to stop protecting the friendship more than myself, she said. That goes both ways. I'm also going to stop pretending that you're not a factor in my decisions when you are. Okay, I'm not going to let you be the whole decision. But you're a factor. I'll take it, he said. A brief silence. Then she said, How's your week been? He smiled at the window. You want the regular debrief. I want the regular debrief. So he told her about the inbox, about the calls he'd made to 2 editors he'd been avoiding, about the meeting he'd set up with his own agency rep to talk about the photography award implications, about the fact that he'd run into his neighbor Gerald on the and Gerald had said welcome back with absolutely no awareness of what those 2 words contained. She listened. She asked questions. She made the particular sound she made when something was funny, and she didn't want to fully commit to the laugh but couldn't suppress it entirely. It was, structurally, exactly like 100 other phone calls they'd had over 12 years. Except that it wasn't. Because underneath the normalcy of it was the new thing, the fact of what they both knew now, the change that had happened, the words, and the letter, and the 3 days, and the held hand across the kitchen table. All of that was present in every pause and every tone shift and every moment of comfortable silence. They talked for 2 hours. At the end of it, she said, Saturday. What about Saturday? Come over Saturday. Emma's coming down for the weekend, she told me this afternoon. She wants to see you and she wants to. She paused. She texted me separately and said she wants to see us together. Her word. Together. She said together. She's 20 years old and has been emotionally invested in this situation for 6 years. She has opinions. He laughed. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she said. Good night. Lydia. Good night. He stood at the window for a long moment after they hung up. Emma was coming down Saturday. His daughter, who had texted him congratulations about the photography shortlist before he'd even told her, and had called him an oblivious disaster with complete accuracy, and had been rooting for this with the full investment of a young woman who loved her father, and had watched him circle the right thing for 6 years without landing, was coming down Saturday to see them together. Tichidi Futi Diginder. He did not know what Saturday would look like. He knew it would be better than the Saturdays he'd spent pretending. Saturday arrived with the particular quality of a late November day that had made a decision about itself cold. Clear, no ambiguity about the season. He walked over to Lydia's at noon. He brought coffee from the place on Halstead that she preferred. The one with the dark roast that she claimed was the only coffee in Chicago worth the price, which was objectively not true, but had become true through the power of 12 years of agreement. Emma was already there when he arrived. He could hear her before Lydia opened the door. His daughter's voice at its natural volume, which was designed, apparently, to carry through walls. But you have to have known, right, like. There had to have been a specific moment where you thought, okay, this is more than. Lydia opened the door, and Emma was sitting cross-legged on the couch with a mug in both hands, looking enormously interested in whatever Lydia had been about to say. She looked at Ethan. "Dad." She said it with the tone of a person who has caught someone in the middle of a story. "Emma." He held up the coffees I brought. "We have coffee. Come sit down. We were just talking about you." I gathered. He set the coffees on the counter, came and sat in the chair across from them. Emma was looking at him with the specific expression of a 20-year-old who has opinions about her parents' romantic life and is not going to pretend otherwise. "What?" he said. "Nothing." She sipped her coffee. "You look different." "I look the same." "You look less like a man who left his keys inside a locked car." He looked at Lydia. Lydia pressed her lips together. "Your mother," he said. "Mom's very quotable," Emma said. "So, what's the plan?" Emma: "I'm not asking for a formal presentation. I'm asking what the shape of things looks like. Seattle, Chicago, the photography award thing, all of it." She looked between them. "I have a vested interest." "You're 20, he said. "I'm 20, and I've watched you two do this dance for 6 years, and I'm emotionally exhausted." "What's happening?" He looked at Lydia. She looked at him. "It's a work in progress," Lydia said. "That's not an answer." "It's an honest answer," Lydia said. "We're figuring it out." "Are you figuring it out in the same city or different cities?" "Potentially different cities. Temporarily," Ethan said. "But the operative word is temporarily." Emma looked at him steadily. "You're okay with that?" "I'm not thrilled with it," he said. "But I'm not letting geography be the reason this doesn't happen. I've been letting geography be a convenient excuse for long enough." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded a single, slow, genuine nod that meant she had processed and accepted. "Okay," she said. "Good. That's good." "Is that all you wanted to know?" Lydia said. "No," Emma said pleasantly. "I have several more questions, but I'll pace myself." She looked at Ethan. "The photography award. Tell me about that." He told her what he knew: the shortlist, the Valencia Portrait Series, the committee's request. Emma listened with the focused tension she inherited from her mother, and the way she held a coffee cup when she was thinking hard, which was from him. "What's the piece?" she said. "The one that got shortlisted." "It's a portrait," he said. "A woman in a transit center in Valencia. She'd been in transit for 14 months. She's sitting in a plastic chair with a bag on her lap, and she's looking at something off-frame, something I couldn't see from where I was standing. But the way she's looking at it," he stopped. "She's not scared. She's not sad. She's patient, with a kind of patience that you don't get to until you've been through the thing she'd been through. And there's something in her face that I've never quite been able to name. But when I look at it, I understand it." Emma was quiet. "What do you understand?" she said. He thought about it. "That waiting isn't the same as giving up," he said. That sometimes you're patient, not because you've stopped hoping, but because you've decided the thing you're waiting for is worth it." The room was quiet. Emma looked at Lydia. Lydia was looking at Ethan with an expression he couldn't fully read from across the room, but which made his chest do that specific thing again. Emma cleared her throat. "Right," she said. "So the photograph is definitely about the woman in Valencia." "Emma," he said. "I'm just noting the theme," she said. "I'm not drawing conclusions." "You're drawing conclusions." "I have a liberal arts education, and I can't help it." She unfolded from the couch, took her mug to the kitchen, called back. "I'm making more coffee. Don't have any important conversations while I'm gone." He looked at Lydia. She looked at him. "She's something," he said quietly. "She's extraordinary," Lydia said. "She gets it from somewhere. Her mother. And her father." Lydia held his gaze. "Ethan, the photograph. You titled it?" "Yes." "When did you take it?" "March, 2 weeks before I left." "So you took it 2 weeks before you ended your contract?" "Yes." "And you titled it, Waiting, while you were in the middle of." Lydia. She stopped. He leaned forward in the chair, elbows on his knees. "The thing I understood when I looked at that woman in Valencia," he said quietly. "I understood because I recognized it, because I had been wearing it on my own face for years and not seeing it in the mirror." He held her eyes. "I was waiting. I just hadn't admitted what for." She pressed her lips together. From the kitchen, Emma made a deliberate amount of noise with the coffee grinders, the sound of a 20-year-old giving two people a moment. "I've decided something," Lydia said. "Tell me." "About the agency." She said it carefully. "I'm going to take the meeting with Vantage, not because I've decided to sell, but because I've been avoiding it out of fear, and I told myself I was done making decisions from fear." She paused. "If the meeting tells me what I already know, that the agency needs to stay mine, that it's the structure my life is built round, then I'll know that, and I'll turn down the offer. And if it doesn't tell you that," she held his gaze, "then I'll know that too." He nodded. "And Seattle," he said. "Seattle is good work," she said simply. "And I think I should do good work." And I think she stopped, started again. "I think for a long time I made the choice that kept me most stable. The choice with the fewest variables, and stability is not a bad thing. But I don't think it's the whole thing either." "No," he said, "it's not." Emma came back with her coffee, looked at both of them, and evidently decided the conversation had reached a natural landing point. Because she sat back down and said, "Okay, different subject. Tell me about Barcelona, specifically whether it was as beautiful as it looks on the Instagram, because I've been there on Instagram for 3 years. And I need to know if the algorithm is lying to me." The afternoon moved the way good afternoons do, without urgency, accumulating warmth. They ordered lunch. Emma took over the music, which meant the apartment shifted from the ambient quiet it usually held to something with more energy. And Lydia tolerated this with the particular grace of a woman who loved the person making the noise. He watched her with Emma, the ease of them, the way they talked. The specific warmth that Lydia had always shown his daughter since the beginning, which he had always noted and filed as, "She's a good person." He understood, now that he had been filing the right information in the wrong folder for a very long time. Late afternoon. Emma disappeared to take a call someone from school. Something that required the bedroom and a closed door. He and Lydia sat in the living room with the remains of lunch, and the low afternoon coming through the windows. "Can I say something?" he said. "You've been saying things for 5 days. I don't think I can stop you now." He almost smiled. "I don't want to be the person who makes your decisions harder." "You're not. I want to be the person who makes them not easier, necessarily, but clearer. Because you're more clear-headed when you're not doing it alone, and you've been doing too much alone." She looked at him. "I know I'm a factor in all of it," he said. "The agency, Seattle, the timing. I know my being here changes the variables. I just make sure that what I'm adding is," he searched for the right word, "weight you can use, not weight that pulls you under." She was quiet for a moment. "Ethan," she said, "do you know what you've never done? In 12 years. Tell me." "You've never once made me feel like my ambition was a problem." She said it simply. "Not once. When I was going into debt for the agency, when I turned down the consulting contract, that would have been more money for less stress. When I took on the board clients instead of selling to the bigger firm 5 years ago." She paused. You just always said, 'What do you need?' And then you helped me get it, without making it about you." He looked at her. "That's not nothing," she said. "That's actually for a woman my age, who built what I built. That is extraordinarily rare." He didn't say anything, let it sit. "So when I say you're a factor," she said, "I don't mean you're a complication. I mean you're a—" She stopped, shook her head slightly. "I'm going to cry again. Kitchen's available. You said the kitchen counts as private. You're in the living room." She laughed, the low, reluctant, best sound he knew. Emma's door opened. She came back in with the specific expression of someone who had overheard the tail end of something and was deciding whether to acknowledge it. She sat down, looked at both of them. Okay, she said, real talk. He looked at her. Uh-oh. I'm serious. Emma set down her phone. I know you're both figuring things out. I know it's complicated, and there are jobs and cities, and a photography award, and whatever. But I want to say one thing, and then I'll drop it. He waited. I've watched you, Dad, Emma said, my whole life. I've watched you be careful. I've watched you be responsible and patient and good. You've been good. But I've also watched you be a little bit afraid of wanting too much, of asking for the thing you actually want instead of the thing that seems reasonable. He said nothing. And Lydia, Emma continued, I've known you since I was 13. And you're one of the most capable people I've ever seen. You can do anything you decide to do. I genuinely believe that. She paused. But I also think you've been deciding to do the things that don't ask you to need anyone. The room was very quiet. I'm 20 years old, Emma said, and I know I don't know everything. But I know that the two of you in the same room is better than either of you alone in separate rooms. And I know that whatever you decide about Seattle, or the agency, or any of it, she looked between them. Don't decide it from fear, okay? Just don't do what you've been doing, which is being afraid of wanting this. Ethan looked at his daughter. He thought about what it meant that she was 20 years old, and could see clearly what had taken him 57 years to approach. He thought that she was going to be extraordinary, that she already was. Okay, he said. Emma looked at him. Okay. Okay, he said again. She looked at Lydia. Okay, Lydia said quietly. Emma nodded, picked up her phone. Good. Now can we talk about whether either of you wants dessert? Because I walked past a place on the way here that had a sign about pie, and I haven't stopped thinking about it. He burst out laughing. Lydia put her face in her hands, but he could hear her laughing too. And the afternoon kept going. Later, after Emma had gotten her pie and eaten 2/3 of it and claimed the rest for breakfast, and eventually hugged them both in the doorway with the unself-conscious warmth of someone who did not have a complicated relationship with feeling things after she'd gone, and the apartment was quiet again, and he'd helped clear the coffee table, and she'd turned the lamp on against the early dark. Lydia stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him. She's right, she said. She usually is, he said. It's very inconvenient. I'm going to take the Seattle contract, she said. He stopped, turned to look at her. I decided just now, she said. Not because of you, not to run from you. Because it's the right work at the right time, and I have been waiting to do something like it for years, and I'm done waiting for the perfect circumstances that never arrive. He nodded. And I'm going to take the Vantage meeting, she said. And I'm going to listen. And I'm going to decide about the agency based on what's true, not what's safe. Okay, he said. And you, she said, are going to confirm the photography shortlist, and you are going to go to wherever that committee wants you, and you are going to let that work be seen, because it deserves to be seen. Okay, he said again. And none of that, she said, is the end of this. He crossed the kitchen, stood in front of her. None of it, he said. She looked up at him. You said you were looking at Vancouver. I said I was looking at Vancouver, he agreed. That's 50 minutes from Seattle. It is. That's not nothing, he said. It's not nothing. She held his gaze for a long moment. The lamp in the living room was on, and the kitchen was half dark, and outside the city was doing what it always did, and none of it mattered particularly. I need you to promise me something, she said. What? If this gets hard, not complicated, not busy, but hard, the real kind, you don't go to another continent. He looked at her steadily. I don't go to another continent. And if I go quiet because I'm scared, you don't let me stay quiet. I won't let you stay quiet. And if I try to be kind about something instead of honest, I'll call you on it, he said. The way you've always called me on it. She exhaled. He put his hands on either side of her face. She let him. He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her for 12 years, without permission, without acknowledgement, without letting himself understand what he was seeing. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not away from you. Not this time." She put her hands over his. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. And this time when he kissed her, there was no dropped mug, no held breath, no 12 years of tension waiting to break. There was just this two people who had taken the long way, who had been afraid in all the ways that real people are afraid, who had waited and circled and almost and nearly and finally, just finally. Outside, the November dark settled over Chicago. Neither of them moved away. December arrived the way it always did in Chicago, without asking permission, without softening the edges. One morning the cold had a different quality to it, harder and more final, and the city adjusted itself accordingly, pulling inward, settling into the long season. Ethan noticed it on his walk to the coffee shop on the 15th, the same walk he'd taken 100 times, the same street, the same cold, the same city, everything different. December 15th was the day of the photography committee announcement. He hadn't told many people. Marcus knew, Emma knew, Lydia knew Lydia, had known for 2 weeks, and had not made it into a larger event than it was, which was one of the things he loved about her, that she understood the difference between supporting someone and performing support at them. He'd gotten the call at 9:47 in the morning. He was standing in his kitchen, which was where he'd been standing since 9:15. Not working, not reading, just existing in the space between knowing and not knowing. The woman from the committee was professional and warm, and said his name correctly on the first try, which he took as a good sign. And then she said the words in a sequence that took approximately 4 seconds to fully process. First place. International Press Photography Committee. Annual recognition. The portrait titled Waiting. He said thank you. He said it twice. He stood in his kitchen after the call ended and looked at the wall where he had a print of the photograph in question, the woman in Valencia. The plastic chair. The patient eyes looking at something off frame, and he felt something move through him that was too large and too quiet for the room. He called Lydia. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me," she said. "First place," he said. She made a sound he had never heard from her before, not the low, reluctant laugh, not the careful exhale, not the managed composure. Something unguarded and immediate and completely real. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah. First place." She said it like she was tasting the shape of it. First place. That's what they said. Oh my God. He heard her moving. A chair, a door. Oh my God. How are you? What are you feeling right now? Honestly. He looked at the photograph on his wall. I'm thinking about the woman in the picture. I don't know where she is now. I don't know if she made it to where she was going. I hope she's okay. A pause. That, Lydia said quietly, is why you won. He sat down. Emma's going to lose her mind. I already texted Emma. He stopped. You already. I pressed send about 4 seconds after you said first place. I have no regrets. A pause. She responded in approximately 1 second. It was all capitals. I won't repeat it. He shook his head slowly. These two women in his life, already in communication, already a unit, before he'd even gotten off the phone. There's going to be an exhibition, he said. They want the full Valencia series shown. New York, probably, then touring. They want me there for the opening. When? February. February, she repeated. February. The same month she was starting the Seattle contract. He had done the math on this already. He had been doing the math on a lot of things for 3 weeks. I know, he said. We'll figure it out, she said. Exactly what he had said to her, returning it to him cleanly. Yeah, he said. We will. He hung up and called Emma, who did in fact lose her mind, and who said several things at a volume that suggested she was not in a library, and who at the end of it said, Dad, the photograph is about waiting for the right thing. You know that, right? And he said, Emma, and she said, I'm just saying. And he said, I know what you're saying. And They both went quiet for a moment, with the mutual understanding of two people who are related and know each other too well for comfortable pretending. "I'm really proud of you," she said, quietly, without the performance. "Thank you. Kid." "Don't call me kid. I'll call you kid when you're 80. She laughed. "Good." The next 3 weeks moved with the specific velocity of a life that has decided to happen all at once. The photography committee confirmed the exhibition details. His agency rep sent 4 new contract proposals in 1 week, which was more than he'd received in the previous 4 months combined, and which was what recognition did. It opened doors that had been standing just slightly ajar. He started fielding calls from editors and journalists and 2 documentary filmmakers who had seen the Valencia series and wanted to discuss longer projects. He handled all of it. But there was a specific quality to the handling now, a groundedness in it that he hadn't had in Barcelona, like a man who has found his footing on shifting terrain and is no longer spending half his energy just staying upright. He knew where that came from. He was not subtle about knowing. Lydia Pia took the Vantage meeting on the 18th. She told him about it that evening, on the phone, in the way she had started telling him things completely, without the careful editing she'd previously applied to anything that made her seem uncertain or conflicted. "They're serious," she said. "The offer is serious, and the people are serious, and I sat in that room for 2 hours, and I understood, for the first time, what I've actually built." A pause. "Not in theory. In the room with people who wanted to pay a significant amount of money for it. That's a different kind of understanding." "How did it feel?" "Strange," she said. "Good strange. Like being told something about yourself by someone who has no reason to flatter you." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd have an answer by January 15th. That's a month. I need a month." "Okay. I'm leaning toward yes," she said. "And I need you to hear me say that without it meaning anything except what it is. It means you're making the right call for your work," he said. "That's all it means." A pause. "You're very easy to talk to," she said. "It's annoying." "Why is it annoying?" "Because it means I can't use you as a reason to complicate things. You just keep being reasonable and supportive, and it removes all my excuses for catastrophizing. I'll try to be more difficult." "Please don't, a beat. I'm scared," she said. "About selling. Not because I don't want to. Because I've never not had it. 11 years. It's the longest relationship I've had with anything. Longer than us. You weren't a relationship yet. You were a very long exercise in denial." She paused. "Don't take that personally. I'm counting it as a compliment." She almost laughed. "How?" 12 years of denial implies 12 years of something worth denying." She was quiet for a moment. "That's actually a reasonable way to look at it. I have my moments." December moved. The exhibition details solidified. His name appeared in 2 publications in a way it hadn't before, not in the trade context, not just in the photography world, but in the wider cultural context. That meant the work had crossed over into something larger. He read the pieces and felt the particular discomfort of being seen at a scale he wasn't used to. And then he went for a run and came home and called Marcus. And Marcus said, "You spent 30 years being good at this. Let people say so." He was trying. Christmas was Emma. She came home for 10 days, home being his apartment, and, by the second day, equally Lydia's, because Emma migrated to Lydia's for coffee and conversation with the ease of someone who had been doing it for years and saw no reason to be formal about it now. The 3 of them had dinner twice, the first time. Ethan made the eggs, he narrated out loud, and Emma filmed him doing it on her phone, with the expression of someone who had waited years to document this specific absurdity. The second time, Lydia made something she called simple pasta that took an hour and a half and required 3 consultations with a cookbook and tasted extraordinary. After the second dinner, Emma sat back from the table and looked at both of them and said, "This is better, just so you know." This is better than any version of either of you I've known before. Ethan looked at Lydia. Lydia looked at him. We know, he said. Emma nodded, like something was settled. On Christmas Eve, after Emma had gone to bed, she was 20, and still wanted to sit in his apartment on Christmas Eve, and he had never been less inclined to argue with or do any impulse in his life. Impulsive, he sat at his kitchen table and opened his laptop and looked at the Vancouver listings again. Not researching. Not escaping. Something else entirely. He was building a picture of what comes next. There was a studio available in Gastown, street level, north-facing light, reasonable square footage, month to month initially. He'd spoken to a commercial real estate agent there, twice. He'd looked up the photojournalism community in the area strong, active, internationally connected. He'd spoken to one of the documentary filmmakers who had reached out, a woman named Priya, whose work he'd admired for years, and who happened to be based in Vancouver, and who had said, when he mentioned he was considering the area, you should come, seriously. Come and we'll talk. He had not told Lydia about Priya, not yet. Not because he was hiding it, because he was still learning the difference between processing privately and keeping secrets, and he was not always certain where that line fell, and he was trying to err on the right side. He'd tell her in the morning. He closed the laptop, went to bed. Christmas morning. Emma made pancakes that were technically edible, and he made coffee. And they sat at the table and opened the two practical gifts. They'd agreed on. He'd gotten her the camera he'd been watching her look at online since October, the one she'd been saving for, and she'd gotten him a journal I mentioned once in passing at least 8 months ago, and clearly remembered, which was a talent he recognized as inherited from himself. And they ate pancakes and drank coffee, and the morning had the specific quality of a good thing that was also a complete thing, whole in itself, needing nothing added. Emma looked up from her pancakes. Tell me the Vancouver plan, she said. He looked up. What? Dad. She pointed at him with her fork. You've been on your laptop every evening for a week. You have the look you get when you're building something in your head but haven't said it out loud yet. You had it before Barcelona, too. She tilted her head. Is it Vancouver? He set his coffee down. Yes, he said. Does Lydia know? She knows I've been looking. She doesn't know the current specifics. Emma nodded it slowly. When are you going to tell her? Today, he said. This morning, actually. I was going to call her after breakfast. Emma regarded him. You should go over there. It's Christmas morning. She's alone on Christmas morning, Dad. She said it simply. She doesn't have family here. Her mother's gone. Her sister's in Atlanta. She's spending Christmas morning by herself, and you're 8 blocks away. He was quiet. He had known this. He had known this and had told himself he didn't want to presume, didn't want to insert himself into her morning without being asked. He understood now. Sitting at his kitchen table on Christmas morning with his daughter, looking at him with patient precision. That not presuming was sometimes another word for protecting yourself. Go, Emma said. I'll eat the rest of the pancakes. I've been trying to get you out of the apartment since I woke up. No, you haven't. I've been thinking about it since I woke up. She waved her fork. Go. He went. He walked 8 blocks in the Christmas morning cold, with 2 cups of coffee from the place on Halsted closed. It was Christmas. He'd made them himself and put them in travel cups, because some things you don't improvise. And he rang Lydia's buzzer at 9:42. A pause. Who is it? Package delivery. A longer pause. It's Christmas, she said, through the intercom. I have coffee. The door buzzed open. She was at the door before he reached it. She'd come down the hall to open it, which meant she'd moved quickly, which meant she'd wanted to. She was in pajamas and socks, and her hair was down, which was not the way he'd seen her the morning after he came back. The hair-up work version. This was the private version, the version that didn't exist for most people. She looked at the coffee cups. She took both of them. Come in, she said. He came in, She gave 1 cup back. They stood in her entryway for a moment. "Merry Christmas," he said. "Merry Christmas." She looked at him. "You didn't have to come over. Emma kicked me out." She almost smiled. She didn't. She implied very strongly that my presence was surplus to requirements. He paused. "And she told me you were alone." Lydia looked at her coffee cup. "She's not wrong. A beat. I was going to call my sister. I have a 3 o'clock with a client in Denver, which is not ideal, but it's the work. Cancel it." She looked up. "I can't cancel a client call on Christmas. You can move it to the 26th. Ethan." "Lydia, it's Christmas. You are not taking a client call." He said it calmly. "Not as an instruction, as an observation about how things should be. Move it." She looked at him for a moment. Then she took out her phone and sent an email. "Put the phone away." "Moved," she said. "Good. You're bossy. I'm decisive. There's a difference." "You're going to decide that there's a difference," she said. And the corner of her mouth moved, and he understood that they were going to be okay. Not eventually. Now, already. He followed her to the kitchen. She put on more coffee, the real coffee, the dark roast. And he sat at the table where they'd sat 3 weeks ago, with her hands in his, and the Vantage meeting on the horizon, and Seattle waiting. "I have something to tell you," he said. She turned from the counter. Read his face. Good something or complicated something? Both. She sat down. "Tell me." He told her about Vancouver, the specifics this time, not the vague looking he'd mentioned before, the Gastown studio, the month-to-month, Priya, and the documentary conversations, the photojournalism community, the geography 4 hours from Seattle, 50 minutes by air. She listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting, letting him finish before she responded. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. "You've been building this," she said. "For a few weeks." "Yes." "You didn't say anything." "I was figuring out if it was real before I said it." She looked at him. "Is it real?" "I've spoken to a real estate agent 3 times. I have a call with Priya in January." He held her gaze. "It's real." She pressed both hands flat on the table. He recognized this. It was the gesture she made when she was arriving at something, settling into a new understanding. "You would move to Vancouver," she said slowly. "Not for me, for the work." "For the work," he said. "And because the work would put me 50 minutes from where you are, and those 2 things are not in conflict. I'm not sacrificing one for the other." She looked at him steadily. "You're sure?" "I've been a photographer for 30 years, he said. "I can work from anywhere. I've known that for 30 years, and I've been using it to go away from things rather than toward them. I'm reversing the direction." She pressed her lips together. He watched her process it, not resisting, not leaping, just absorbing it the way she'd absorbed things she hadn't expected. "Priya Mehta," she said. He blinked. "You know her." "I know her work. The Displacement series from 2 years ago." Lydia looked at him. "That's extraordinary company to be keeping." "Ethan." "She reached out to me. Because you won first place with a photograph about waiting," Lydia said. "Do you understand what's happening with your career right now? It's moving faster than I expected. It's moving into exactly the place it should be." She said it with a certainty that he found steadying. "You spent years doing important work that didn't at the scale it deserved. That's changing." "I know. And Vancouver is actually," she stopped. "It's actually a good base for that kind of work. The international connections, the documentary community, the access to." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm looking at it." She met his eyes. "You're not doing this for me. I am doing it partly for you," he said. "I'm not pretending otherwise. You're a factor, a significant one. But the work makes sense independently of you, and I need you to know that." He paused. "Because I told you I wasn't going to be the reason you shrink. And I'm not going to let you be the reason I don't grow either. That's not how this works." She was very still. "How does it work?" she said. "We both grow," he said. "In the same general direction, close enough to actually be in each other's lives. Not performing long distance, not pretending that geography doesn't matter, Not he stopped. Not doing what we did for 12 years, which was finding sophisticated reasons to stay almost. She exhaled. I sold the agency, she said. He went still. She looked at him. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not entirely. I called Richard this morning, early. I don't know what woke me up, but I woke up at 6, and I lay there for 40 minutes, and then I knew. And I called Richard at 6:45, because I didn't want to wait until after Christmas, because waiting would have meant second-guessing. Lydia. It's the right decision, she said. I know it is. The team stays. The work continues. The clients are protected. And she stopped, looked at her hands. I have been the agency for 11 years, and I think I need to find out who I am when I'm not. A pause. The Seattle contract is a good place to start that. He sat back. She had sold the agency. On Christmas morning, before he'd arrived, she'd made the biggest professional decision of the last decade at 6:45 in the morning on a holiday, and hadn't called him first, hadn't needed to. Had done it because she knew, and she was done waiting for better timing. How do you feel? He said. Terrified, she said. And right, both completely. He reached across the table. She put her hand in his. Merry Christmas, he said. She laughed. The low, reluctant one. This is the strangest Christmas I've ever had. Is that bad? No, she said. It's the opposite of bad. She squeezed his hand once. It's the first one in a long time that felt like something was beginning instead of just continuing. He held her hand, and they sat in the kitchen on Christmas morning, with the coffee and the decision and the Vancouver plan, and Seattle, and all the rest of it arranged around them, like the furniture of a life that was finally being lived forward, instead of managed in place. His phone buzzed. Emma, a text. Is she okay? Did you tell her? Are you staying for Christmas dinner? Because I'm coming over at 4 and I'm bringing pie, and I need a head count. He showed it to Lydia. She read it, looked up. She already planned Christmas dinner. She planned it before I left, he said. She told me she was bringing pie. She's been running this since 6 a.m. She's extraordinary. She gets it from somewhere. Lydia looked at him. Don't be charming on Christmas. That's when it's most effective. She shook her head. But she was smiling, fully, without the almost. He texted Emma back. She's okay. Told her, yes to dinner. Bring enough pie. Emma's response was immediate. Obviously I'm bringing enough pie. What do you think I am? He put the phone away. The morning opened up around them unhurried, settled, real. They talked. Not about decisions or contracts or timelines. About Emma. About the pancakes that were apparently only technically edible. About a book she'd been reading that she couldn't stop thinking about. About a memory she had of her mother making Christmas breakfast in a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and burned toast. He listened. He had always been good at listening to her. He understood now that he had been listening to a woman he loved for 12 years and had needed to stop pretending he was listening to a friend. At 2:15, his phone rang. Unknown number. Vancouver area code. He looked at it, looked at Lydia. Answer it, she said. He answered. Mr. Cole, a man's voice, measured, direct. This is Daniel Yuen. I'm the director of the Pacific Documentary Institute in Vancouver. I hope I'm not interrupting your holiday. Not at all, Ethan said. I'll be brief. Priya Mehta shared your name with me, and I've been following the Valencia series and the committee recognition. We're developing a fellowship program, 6 months, based in Vancouver. Full creative support for a long-form documentary project. We have one position to fill. Priya recommended you specifically. I'd like to set up a conversation in January. Ethan sat very still. A fellowship, he said. 6 months, starting in March, which I understand aligns with some transitions you may be navigating. A pause. We're specifically interested in photographers whose work sits at the intersection of documentary and portraiture. Your piece, Waiting, is exactly the kind of work we want to support. I'd like to talk, Ethan said. January works. Good. My assistant will reach out with times. A brief pause. And Mr. Cole, congratulations on the recognition. It was well deserved. He hung up. Lydia was watching his face. Vancouver, she said. It was not a question. A fellowship, he said. 6 months. Starting March. She pressed her lips together. That's not a coincidence. No, he said. It's not. March, she said. I start in Seattle in February. You'd be in Vancouver by March. 50 minutes away. 50 minutes away, she repeated. They looked at each other, across the kitchen table, on Christmas morning with Vancouver and Seattle, and the fellowship and the sold agency and the exhibition in February arranged around them. Not as obstacles, not as complications, but as the actual shape of what their lives were becoming. We're going to be okay, she said. We're going to be more than okay, he said, Bone. She held his gaze. You're very sure about that? I've been wrong about a lot of things, he said. I was wrong about Barcelona. I was wrong about timing. I was wrong about waiting for the right circumstances. He paused. But I'm not wrong about this. She didn't look away. Okay, she said. Then I believe you. Emma arrived at 4 exactly, with pie and a bottle of wine, and the unsuppressible energy of a 20-year-old who had correctly predicted everything and was not going to pretend she hadn't. She walked in, looked at both of them at the kitchen table, looked at the coffee cups, looked at their faces. Good, she said simply. Set down the pie, went to find glasses. Dinner was the 3 of them, around Lydia's kitchen table with whatever could be assembled from 2 apartments, combined, nothing formal. Nothing planned, entirely sufficient. Emma talked about school and her roommate, and a professor she disagreed with, and a project she was genuinely excited about. Lydia talked about Seattle, about the firm, about the work that was waiting. Ethan talked about Vancouver and the fellowship and Priya and the exhibition in February. Emma listened to the Vancouver part, with her chin in her hand and her eyes tracking between them. So you'll be in Vancouver, she said. And you'll be in Seattle, and that's 50 minutes, Lydia said. And the fellowship is 6 months. Starting March, Ethan said. And after the fellowship. He looked at Lydia. She looked at him. We'll figure it out, they said, at the same time, without planning to. Emma pointed at both of them. That right there, that's the thing. She sat back. You're doing it on purpose now. Doing what? Ethan said. Choosing each other. She said it simply. Before you were both waiting for the other person to go first. Now you're both just going. At the same time. She picked up her wine glass. It's much better. He looked at Lydia. She was looking at Emma, with the expression he'd come to associate with the love she had for his daughter. Warm and specific, and slightly undone by it. Much better, Lydia agreed. The dinner wound down the way good dinners do, slowly, reluctantly, with no one quite willing to be the first to move. Emma eventually pulled out her phone and showed them some video of something funny that had nothing to do with any of them. And they all watched it and laughed, and the evening had that quality, that specific quality of a thing being new and comfortable at the same time. At 9, Emma hugged Lydia in the doorway for longer than a quick goodbye and said something quiet in her ear that Ethan didn't hear. Lydia's expression shifted. She hugged her back, just as long. Emma came and hugged him. Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, kid. She pulled back, looked at him. You kept your promise. He didn't need to ask which one. I kept my promise, he said. She left. The apartment was quiet. He stayed. Not because she asked. Not because it was planned. Because it was where he was and where he wanted to be, and there was no longer a version of himself that was going to talk himself out of that. They sat on the couch, not at opposite ends, not with careful distance, and the evening moved around them slowly. She leaned against his shoulder the way she had 3 weeks ago, except this time, when he put his arm around her. Neither of them held any part of themselves back. I've been thinking about something, she said. Tell me. The woman in the photograph, she said. The one in Valencia, the patient eyes. What about her? You said you didn't know where she ended up. She was quiet for a moment. I hope she found it, whatever she was looking at. He thought about the photograph, the patient eyes. The quality of waiting that wasn't giving up. I think she did, he said. I think that's what I saw in her face. Not hope that hadn't been tested. Hope that had been tested all the way through and survived. Lydia was quiet. That's what the picture is, he said. That's why it won. She turned her head slightly and looked at him from where she was resting on his shoulder. I know, she said. I always knew. He held her closer. Outside, Chicago was doing what it always did, indifferent and continuous. Enormous and indifferent to the specific things that happened. Inside its particular geometry of streets and buildings and lit windows, somewhere on the north side, Emma was taking a cab back to campus, probably texting her roommate, probably using the word finally. Inside, on Wrightwood Avenue, in apartment 4C. Two people who had taken the long way held on to each other in the particular quiet of a thing that was done pretending. No more almost, no more geography as an excuse. No more looking away from the yellow dress and graduation party and the specific quality of light that had been trying to tell him something for 6 years. Months later, in March. The morning he loaded the last of his camera equipment into the car that would take him to O'Hare and then to Vancouver. She stood in his apartment doorway and looked at him the way she had on the first night, certain and a little terrified, which was the right combination. 50 minutes, she said. 50 minutes, he said. He kissed her, picked up the bag, and he walked toward what he'd been circling for 12 years. Not because the timing was perfect, not because the fear was gone, but because he had finally understood, standing in a dark room in Barcelona, with 4 unfinished words on a phone screen, that the only thing worse than being afraid was letting the fear make all your decisions. He was not letting it do that anymore. In the kitchen of a Seattle apartment, 8 months later, Lydia Harper sat at a drafting table, sketching a children's book character, a small fox, patient-eyed, waiting at the edge of something large when she heard the door. She heard him set his bag down. She heard him come into the kitchen. She felt his arms come around her from behind, and she leaned back into him, and neither of them said anything for a moment. A moment because some things had moved past the need to be said. She turned slightly and looked at the sketch in front of her. "What do you think?" she said. He looked at the fox, the patient eyes, the particular quality of something that was waiting, not because it had given up, but because it understood the thing it was waiting for was worth it. "Morning, best friend," she said. "Morning, girlfriend," he said. And this time finally, deliberately, completely neither of them ran away.